On one side, there was a woman standing alone in northern Italy, speaking fluent Italian to a room packed with small children who rushed toward her with open arms. Crowds had gathered in such numbers that some people drove 3 hours simply to attend. This was a working visit focused on early childhood research carried out without a husband beside her, without a supporting entourage, and without any visible need for approval from the crowd. Just her, continuing work she has spent years steadily building. On the other side, there was a glossy brand video coming out of Montecito that left the internet spending most of the week trying to figure out what exactly it was meant to sell. Financial reports suggested increasing pressure for that brand to start generating something meaningful soon, and quietly, in the background, the Invictus Games organization appeared to be losing sponsors one after another, while the noise around its figureheads only grew louder. That week tells a story worth understanding properly, not because of gossip, but because of what it exposes. For years, a gap has been widening, and what made it significant was seeing two entirely different approaches to public life placed side by side in the same news cycle, allowing the world to compare them in real time. Let's begin in Italy, because that is where the center of this story truly sits. Understanding what happened there is essential if you want to understand everything that came afterward. Catherine travelled to Reggio Emilia as part of her early years initiative. For those who have not closely followed this side of her work, here is the context that matters. Reggio Emilia is home to one of the most respected approaches to early childhood education in the world. It is a philosophy that educators across the globe have studied, adapted, and replicated. It is not a famous holiday destination. It is not some glamorous setting chosen for appearances. It was selected because it directly aligned with the work she has committed herself to. And what exactly is that work? Catherine has spent years focused on understanding early childhood development. Not because someone suggested it would create good headlines or photographs, but because she genuinely cares about the subject. She has immersed herself in research, held discussions with leading experts, and returned repeatedly to the same conclusion: that the earliest years of a child's life shape almost everything that follows. Yet societies repeatedly fail to invest enough in that period because the benefits are slow and difficult to measure in ways that attract political attention. This is not a fashionable issue. It does not naturally lead to magazine covers or celebrity endorsements. It is slow, patient, often unglamorous work whose results may not become visible for decades. She chose it precisely because it is serious. Over time, she built her public role around a subject that rewards consistency and depth rather than spectacle. That decision, made years ago and maintained steadily ever since, became the foundation for everything that unfolded in Italy. Still, very few observers expected the scale of the reception waiting for her. The crowds were huge. People had travelled for hours, not for a concert, not for a movie premiere, but for a royal visit centred around research into child development. And when Catherine stepped out of that car alone, in a foreign country with no William standing beside her, the reaction from the crowd sounded more like something you would expect at a packed stadium than outside a research centre. She sat down on the floor with children. Cameras captured her with a wide-eyed, giggling baby who seemed delighted simply to be near her. Then came the detail that genuinely surprised many people. She spoke Italian to the children, actual fluent Italian, because what many only fully remembered in that moment was that Catherine had once lived in Florence before university. That chapter of her life had quietly faded into the background over the years, and suddenly it felt alive again in a room full of Italian children responding to her instantly. By every account, Italy embraced her completely. And there is a reason this visit connected so deeply. Italy is a country centered around family, children, and the closeness of extended households. A visiting princess who speaks the language, who visibly lights up around children, and who appears to genuinely enjoy every moment instead of simply fulfilling an obligation, was always likely to connect there. And she did. She made pasta. She was photographed cuddling children in moments that felt entirely natural. Throughout the visit, she moved with a level of ease that many people noticed immediately. Not the practiced ease of someone coached on how to appear relaxed, but the genuine comfort of someone standing exactly where they want to be, doing work they truly care about. And here is something that cannot really be manufactured. The children did not cautiously walk over the way they sometimes do after being instructed to behave for an important visitor. They ran toward her at full speed, arms stretched out as though greeting someone already familiar. Children are probably the most honest audience in existence. Titles mean nothing to them. Popularity means nothing to them. They do not care who happens to be fashionable. Children respond only to warmth, and they recognize it instantly. Every child in that room moved straight toward her. If Palace Insider is giving you the full story, hit the like button. It genuinely helps us reach more people. Royal historian Hugo Vickers, a man who has spent decades closely observing the royal family and whose reputation has been built on careful, measured judgment, described the trip as something close to a perfect royal tour. He pointed to the genuine fact-finding purpose behind it, the dignity in the approach, the obvious happiness and good health visible after a long and difficult chapter, and the remarkable crowds who had travelled 3 hours simply to attend. He called it natural, purposeful, and completely free of artificiality. And coming from someone with Vickers's experience, that assessment matters. This was not the kind of exaggerated praise that comes from fandom. It was a professional conclusion from a man who has witnessed countless royal appearances throughout a very long career. He knows what staged looks like. He knows what authenticity looks like. And his judgment on Reggio Emilia left very little room for ambiguity. Now keep that image in your head for a moment. Hold on to it, because we are about to move across the Atlantic, and the contrast becomes striking. At almost the exact same time Catherine was being welcomed through the streets of northern Italy, a very different sort of content appeared online. Meghan released a promotional video tied to her brand, and the reaction across social media was immediate and, in many cases, remarkably consistent. The footage showed Meghan in an evening gown, placing a hand against her chest, looking dramatically into the camera, sipping tea in a way that seemed intended to feel aspirational, or cinematic, or seductive, or perhaps some combination of all three. And viewers genuinely seemed unsure what exactly the video was trying to be. One person described it as someone behaving as though they believed themselves far more captivating than the audience actually found them. Another compared it to an audition tape for a show that nobody had asked for. Those observations spread because they seemed to capture a feeling many people recognized. There appears to be a growing distance between how Meghan presents herself and how audiences respond to her. And the difficult reality is that this gap does not seem to be shrinking. It appears to be widening. The stronger the effort to project a particular image, the more noticeable the difference becomes between the image itself and the way people receive it. That is not something a new stylist or branding strategy can solve, it sits at the centre of the broader Sussex challenge. And it is worth understanding why a video like this often lands poorly, because the reason itself is revealing. Real warmth rarely announces itself. It does not perform for attention. It simply exists, and the camera happens to capture it. A video built around dramatic expressions and carefully arranged visuals is attempting something different entirely. It is performing warmth, performing intimacy, performing aspiration. And audiences today have become remarkably skilled at recognizing the difference between genuine feeling and a performance designed to imitate feeling. Ironically, the more polished the presentation becomes, the easier it is for viewers to notice the gap. The effort intended to create appeal can become the exact thing that signals people are being sold something. Once viewers sense that, the warmth disappears. Subscribe to Palace Insider and leave your thoughts below, because the conversation around all of this week has been especially interesting. Now, this is where the story shifts away from optics and into mathematics. Reports from sources close to the couple, repeated across several outlets, describe a financial picture that helps explain many recent decisions. According to those reports, the Sussexes reportedly require a minimum of roughly $6 million annually just to maintain their lifestyle in Montecito. $6 million as the starting point, before anything extra. Around half of that, roughly $3 million, is said to go toward private security alone, covering the family and their 2 children. Added on top of that is the mortgage attached to a property reportedly purchased for around $15 million. The As Ever brand, at least in theory, was expected to help solve some of that equation: the jams, the honey, the candles, the carefully curated lifestyle products. But according to most accounts, the numbers do not appear to be moving in the direction they need. Reception has been mixed. Reports surfaced of a candle arriving without a wick. Orange marmalade gradually became something of an ongoing internet punchline, and many observers have come away with the sense that while the brand may be generating attention, it is not creating the kind of revenue capable of making a meaningful impact on an annual operating cost of $6 million. Because attention and revenue are not the same thing. You can have huge amounts of one and very little of the other. And the wider business picture does not seem especially encouraging either. The Netflix relationship appears to have cooled, with projects disappearing along the way. Spotify ended some time ago, and many of the Hollywood opportunities expected to appear after leaving Palace Life seem, for the most part, never to have fully materialized. Harry, according to these reports, remains largely focused on philanthropy, rather than creating major streams of income. And $6 million a year is not just an abstract number, it becomes a treadmill, a figure that has to be reached repeatedly, year after year, no matter what the market is doing, no matter how successful or unsuccessful the latest launch happens to be. A working senior royal does not live with that kind of treadmill because the institution itself provides the structure and support. Step away from that framework, and suddenly every expense becomes your own responsibility. That was the trade the Sussexes chose to make. And according to reporting, the income side of that arrangement no longer appears to be keeping up with the spending side. The irony here is difficult to ignore. One of Harry and Meghan's central reasons for stepping back was the pursuit of financial independence. They did not want institutional oversight over their finances. They stepped out, signed headline-making deals, and presented themselves as proof that a different path could work. And now, according to reports, they reportedly require around $6 million every year simply to maintain their position. The independence they fought to secure has proven to be remarkably expensive. But as uncomfortable as the financial discussion may be, what appears to be happening around the Invictus Games is a different issue entirely, and arguably a more serious one. Invictus was supposed to be the one thing beyond argument. No matter what people think about Harry, no matter what people think about Meghan. The core idea itself, an international sporting event for wounded, injured, and sick service personnel, is genuinely admirable. It came from a sincere place. Harry created it after being inspired by the US Warrior Games, and the mission behind it carries real moral significance, which is exactly why the current situation is difficult to watch. Boeing, one of its major corporate sponsors, has reportedly ended its sponsorship and chosen not to renew. A major aerospace company quietly stepping away is not a small development. Corporations operating at that level do not casually attach their names to causes, and they do not casually remove them either. Every sponsorship decision at that scale passes through extensive due diligence, risk assessment, and brand evaluation. When a company of that size concludes that continuing the relationship no longer makes sense, the decision itself sends a message. It tells you that somewhere inside a very large and very cautious organization, a judgment was made. Then there is Australia. Following Harry and Meghan's visit there, the Australian government reportedly declined to renew a substantial funding allocation connected to Invictus Australia, a move that apparently caught the local organisation off guard. At the same time, the UK government has committed a significant amount of public funding, reported to be around £26 million, for the Birmingham edition planned for 2027. Public money coming in while private sponsors quietly move out. That combination tends to attract scrutiny very quickly, because once taxpayers effectively become the safety net for a project commercial partners are leaving behind, people naturally begin asking questions. Investigative author Tom Bauer, in his book Betrayal, alleged that Invictus funds had been used toward private jet travel, luxury hotels, and transportation arrangements for Harry and Meghan. Those claims remain allegations presented in a book, not legal findings, and they should be described precisely that way. But regardless of the truth surrounding individual accusations, sponsors and donors clearly appear to be responding to something because they continue leaving. The broader pattern itself exists regardless of whether specific claims remain disputed. Allegations can always be challenged. A steady trend of sponsors and partners quietly departing year after year is much harder to dismiss. And for many people in the UK who grew up with a deep respect for the armed forces, the idea that wounded veterans might end up overshadowed at their own event by the personal branding of the figures leading it is not simply disappointing. It genuinely upsets people. The veterans are supposed to remain the focus. The entire purpose of the Games is to honour resilience, recovery, and service. Anything that shifts attention toward the personalities at the top, regardless of intent, starts moving away from the original mission. Now back to Catherine. It is worth pausing to consider what this woman has endured publicly, because the ease and confidence she showed in Italy did not arrive effortlessly. It came at the end of something far harder than a successful tour schedule. Long before marrying William, paparazzi were camped outside her apartment. In 2012, photographs of her taken topless were published without consent, in a violation serious enough to lead to legal action. There were years of relentless commentary about her appearance, her weight, her clothes, her facial expressions, her family. Endless questions surrounding whether an engagement would happen, when it would happen, and why it seemed to be taking so long. Phone hacking, constant speculation, the kind of sustained pressure that quietly breaks many people long before it ever breaks them publicly. And then, while she was privately undergoing cancer treatment last year, huge sections of social media decided her absence itself was suspicious. Suddenly, it became a mystery people felt entitled to solve, a conspiracy they wanted to expose. People dissected her marriage, her health, and even her appearance with a level of entitlement that at times was genuinely unsettling to watch. A real woman facing a real diagnosis, with 3 young children at home and a husband carrying not only the responsibilities of an institution but also the weight of a family crisis. And yet, much of the internet treated the entire situation like a mystery created for their entertainment. The way she responded to all of it tells you almost everything you need to know about her character. Because through every intrusion, every unfair headline, every wave of speculation, every conspiracy theory, she never once positioned herself as a victim. There were no emotional interviews. No public retaliation, none of it was turned into content. And when she finally addressed the cancer diagnosis, it came through a brief video, calm, measured, and direct. No tears staged for the camera, no carefully assembled narrative built around sympathy, no storyline designed to place herself against others or make comparisons. She explained the diagnosis plainly. She thanked the medical professionals caring for her. She asked for privacy. And then, in a way that feels entirely consistent with who she has always seemed to be, she shifted the focus outward. The message was not, "Feel sorry for me." The message was, "You are not alone." She took what was likely the most frightening experience of her life and quietly used it to offer reassurance to strangers facing similar fears. No warrior branding, no expectation that the world reorganize itself around her pain, just honesty, quiet compassion, and concern for other people. That kind of thing cannot be assembled by a communications team. That is character, and not character created for one carefully managed moment, but character built over 20 years of consistent behavior. So when she returned to full duties and traveled to Italy on her own, the people who drove 3 hours to see her were not responding to some PR campaign. They were responding to 2 decades of watching someone quietly and consistently be exactly who she appears to be, without asking for anything in return. Now, what comes next for the Sussex side of the story? Reports suggest Meghan's next move may involve a vow renewal ceremony. According to the framing being discussed, the narrative centers around the idea that they never truly received the wedding experience they deserved. That the institution surrounding the original event somehow prevented them from having the celebration they wanted. That something meaningful was denied to them, and that a vow renewal would finally correct it. Read that back carefully, because it is worth pausing over. They had one of the most watched royal weddings in modern history, a worldwide audience in the billions, a ceremony at Windsor Castle, a carriage procession, the full ceremonial power of a monarchy carrying centuries of history. And the argument reportedly taking shape is that somehow it still was not enough. That the institution itself somehow diminished the occasion. Sources cited in various reports suggest the motivation may be less sentimental and more commercial, because a vow renewal creates content. It creates media coverage. It creates licensing opportunities, perhaps a documentary, a special broadcast, or some larger production. The kind of project capable of generating income at a scale current brand efforts have struggled to reach. A content strategy dressed up as a romantic gesture. Meanwhile, Harry is reportedly involved in discussions with palace officials regarding a possible return to the UK connected to an Invictus event. Those reports suggest conversations have included requests for assurances involving respect and special treatment for Meghan as part of the conditions surrounding his participation. And here is a simple truth most people understand instinctively because life teaches it repeatedly. Respect cannot be negotiated. Respect is earned, not demanded. It develops slowly through years of consistent actions, through showing up even when nobody notices, through doing the work when there is no audience there to applaud, through treating the concerns of others as genuinely meaningful instead of useful leverage. Catherine never had to request it. She gained it the only way anyone truly can. Quietly, slowly, and over a long period of time. William and Catherine are now themselves preparing for Australia. And if you remember the Sussex Australia tour, the controversy, the funding discussions, and the lingering feeling among some observers that the story often centred more around the couple than the country itself, then you already understand why this matters. Same destination, completely different approach, and a public that remembers. William and Catherine are unlikely to publicly address Harry and Meghan while in Australia. They will not issue statements, they will not conduct interviews responding to criticism, they will not visibly engage in conflict. They will simply arrive, do the work, and connect with people naturally. And the comparison will happen on its own, quietly, completely. Because that may be the thing the Sussex operation never fully understood. The monarchy does not need to publicly defeat anyone. It does not need public rebuttals. It does not need interviews. It does not need to visibly fight back. It simply continues moving forward, continues doing the work, continues showing up. A public relations campaign can create a moment. It can produce headlines. It can arrange the perfect photograph. But what it cannot create is a decade. It cannot imitate the slow accumulation of small, steady actions repeated year after year, the kind the public quietly notices, gradually absorbs, and eventually comes to trust. And there is another lesson here as well, one about the difference between attention and affection. Again and again, the Sussex approach has seemed built around attracting attention. The documentary, the memoir, the interview, the essay, the brand video. Each one is designed to make people stop and look. And in a limited sense, it succeeds. People do look. But attention is not affection, and it certainly is not trust. A person can command enormous attention and still create very little genuine warmth. The reaction beneath the brand video generated attention, plenty of it. What it did not generate was warmth. Reggio Emilia generated warmth, the kind of warmth so obvious, so complete, and so unmistakably genuine that watching it made the contrast impossible to miss. Those crowds were not standing there out of curiosity. They were not there for a spectacle. They were not participating in some viral moment. They were there because they sincerely admired the woman who stepped out of that car. That kind of affection takes time. That is trust built slowly. And trust cannot be rushed. It cannot be reverse engineered. It cannot be purchased. Stars depend on spotlights, and spotlights can always move. They can dim. They can be redirected somewhere else entirely. Institutions operate differently. They depend on continuity, on duty, on the quiet and patient work of simply continuing to be there, year after year, season after season, regardless of who happens to be watching. Italy was never really the beginning of this story. It was simply the week when the full shape of where things were heading became difficult to ignore, even for people who had spent a long time trying not to see it. Do you think this week represented a real turning point in how people view both Catherine and the Sussexes? Or was it simply another chapter in a story that has already been unfolding for years? Leave your thoughts below. Subscribe to Palace Insider so you do not miss what happens next. And as always, a like genuinely helps us reach more people. See you in the next one.